The History of Religion on Earth series is an extensive treatment that delves into the ancient origins of religion, the constructs of primitive ritual, the institutionalized timelines, and the corruptions within those timelines that have led up to our current religious paradigm. We aim to analyze the current academic consensus, but more importantly, we want to introduce additional hypotheses that are disallowed by the mainstream. When we look at the deep history of religion, we need to understand what religion is. In his book, The Bonobo and the Atheist, the primatologist Frans de Waal suggests this definition. Religion is the shared reverence for the supernatural, sacred, or spiritual, as well as the symbols, rituals, and worship that are associated with it. The importance of shared experience can't be overstated since the evolution of human religion is inseparable from the ever-increasing sociality of the hominin line. As sociologist Robert Bellah points out, religion is a way of being. We might also view it as a way of feeling together. While much of the scientific study of religion is on theology-based doctrinal religions, the evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar thinks this is a narrow way of studying the phenomenon because it completely ignores the fact for most of human history, religions have had very different shamanic-like forms that lack gods and moral codes. While the theology-based forms are only a few thousand years old and characteristic of post-agricultural societies, Dunbar argues that the shamanic forms date back 500,000 years. These, he claims, are characteristic of hunter-gatherers. If we want to understand how and why religion evolved, we need to start out by examining religions with the cultural accretions stripped away. We need to focus less on questions about big gods and creeds and more on questions about the capacities that emerged in our ancient ancestors that allowed them to achieve a religious way of being together. All societies seem to have religions of some sort, and there are no exceptions to this. There are two major perspectives on why this might be. One is called functionalism or adaptationism, the idea that religion brings positive evolutionary benefits, which are most often framed in terms of its contribution to group living. After all, if all societies have religion, it must have a social purpose. Others take the view that religion is a byproduct of evolutionary processes. Religion can be seen as akin to vestigial organs. Perhaps it was adaptive in the environments it originally evolved in, but in this environment it's maladaptive. Or perhaps religious beliefs are the result of psychological mechanisms that evolved to solve ecological problems unrelated to religion. Either way, evolution didn't aim at religion, religion just emerged as evolution aimed at other things. While folks on both sides of this debate have their reasons, it seems unhelpful to frame the evolution of religion in these either-or terms. Something that was merely a byproduct of a blind evolutionary process could well be taken up by human beings to perform a specific function or solve a specific problem. This can be true for many behaviors, including music. But religion presents a particular puzzle since it often involves extremely costly behaviors such as altruism and at times even self-sacrifice. For this reason, some theorists such as Dunbar argue that we should also look beyond the individual to the survival of the group. This approach is known as multi-level selection, which recognizes that fitness benefits can sometimes accrue to individuals through group-level effects rather than always being the direct product of the individual's own actions. An example is cooperative hunting, which enables groups to catch bigger prey than any member could catch as individuals. Bigger prey means more for me, even if I must share the meat. Such group-level processes require the individual to be sensitive to the needs of other members of the group. If we are to understand religion, then we first need to look back into our deep history to understand how human ancestors evolved to live in groups in the first place. We are, after all, descended from a long line of ancestral hominoids with weak social ties and no permanent group structures. So, How did Darwinian selection work on the neuroanatomy of hominins to make them more social so that they could generate cohesive social bonds to form primary groups? That's not a natural thing for apes. The current mainstream paradigm dictates that our ape line evolved from our last common ancestor around 19 million years ago. Orangutans broke away about 13 to 16 million years ago, while the gorilla line branched away about 8 to 9 million years ago. The hominin line then branched into two about 5 to 7 million years ago, with one line leading to the chimpanzees and bonobos and the other leading to us. We modern humans share 99% of our genes with living chimpanzees, which means we're the two most closely related apes in the whole line. The similarities between humans and chimps are well known, but one important difference has to do with group size. Chimpanzees on average can maintain a group size of about 45. This appears to be the largest group size that can be maintained through grooming alone. In contrast, the average human group is about 150. The reason for this is that humans have the capacity to reach 3 times as many social contacts as chimps for a given amount of social effort. Human religion seems to emerge out of this increased capacity for sociality. The question then becomes, why? As our ape ancestors moved from receding forest habitats to more open environments, like the savannas of eastern and southern Africa, environmental pressures acted on them to make them more social for increased protection from predators and better access to food. It also made it easier to find a mate. Without the ability to maintain new structures, like small groups of 5 or 6 so-called nuclear families, these apes wouldn't have been able to survive. So how did nature achieve this socialization process? The key isn't with what we typically think of as intelligence, but rather with the emotions, which was accompanied by some important changes to our brain structure. Although the neocortex figures prominently in many theories of the evolution of religion, the more important alterations concern the subcortical parts of the brain, which gave hominins the capacity to experience a broader range of emotions. These enhanced emotions promoted bonding, a crucial achievement for the development of religion. The process of subcortical enhancement dates to about 4.5 million years ago when the first Australopithecine emerged. Initially, selection increased the size of their brain about 100 cubic centimeters beyond that of chimpanzees to about 450 cc. For the sake of comparison, this is smaller than later hominins. Homo habilis had a cranial capacity of 775 cc, while Homo erectus was slightly larger than 800 to 850 cc. Modern humans, in contrast, boast a brain size much bigger than any of these, with a cranial capacity of up to 1400 cc. But the comparably smaller brain size doesn't mean that nothing was happening to the hominin brain. Brain size is measured by endocast, but these do not reflect the subcortical enhancement that was occurring between the emergence of Australopiths and Homo erectus. And it is in the story of how these subcortical mechanisms evolved that ultimately the origins of religion are to be discovered. Although the neocortex of humans is 3 times the size of apes, the subcortex is only twice as big, which leads Turner to believe that the enhancement of hominin emotion was well underway before the neocortex began to grow to its current human size. Here's how nature pulled it off. You've probably heard of the so-called 4 primary emotions: aggression, fear, sadness, and happiness. Notice anything about that list? 3 of the emotions are negative, but the promotion of solidarity requires positive emotions, so natural selection had to find a way to mute the negative emotions and enhance the positive ones. The emotional capacities of great apes, particularly chimpanzees, were already more elaborate than many other mammals, so selection had something to work with. Enter the concept of first and second order elaborations, which are emotions that are the result of combinations of 2 or more primary emotions. So, for example, The combination of happiness and anger generates vengeance, while jealousy is the result of combining anger and fear. All, which figures majorly in religion, is the combination of fear and happiness. Second-order elaborations are even more complex and occurred in the evolution from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens. Guilt and shame, for example, two crucial emotions for the development of religion, are the combination of sadness, fear, and anger. It's difficult to imagine religion without the capacity to experience these emotional elaborations for the same reason it's difficult to imagine close social groups without them. Such an emotional palette binds us to one another at a visceral level. Human solidarities are only possible by emotional arousal revolving around possible emotions: love, happiness, satisfaction, caring, loyalty, and the migration of the power of negative emotions, or at least some negative emotions. And once these new valences of positive emotions are neurologically possible, they can become entwined with rituals and other emotion-arousing behaviors to enhance solidarities and eventually produce notions of power gods and supernatural forces. As selection worked on existing brain structures, enhancing emotional and interpersonal capacities, certain behavioral propensities of apes began to evolve. Some of the propensities already present in apes include the ability to read eyes and faces and imitate facial gestures, various capacities for empathy, the ability to become emotionally aroused in social settings, the capacity to perform rituals, a sense of reciprocity and justice, and the ability to see the self as an object in an environment. An increase in the emotional palette available to apes would result in an increase in all of these behavioral capacities. The roots of ritual are in what Bela calls serious play, activities done for their own sake, which may not serve an immediate survival capacity, but which have a very large potentiality of developing more capacities. This view fits with various theories in developmental science, showing that playful activities are often crucial for developing important abilities like theory of mind and counterfactual thinking. Play, in this evolutionary sense, has many unique characteristics. It must be performed in a relaxed field, when the animal is fed and healthy and stress-free. Play also occurs in bouts. It has a clear beginning and ending. In dogs, for example, play is initiated with a bow. Play involves a sense of justice. Big animals need to self-handicap in order to not hurt smaller animals. Now, compare serious play to rituals. Rituals begin and end. They require both shared intention and shared attention. There are norms involved. They take place in a time within time, beyond the time of the everyday. Think, for example, of a football game in which balls can be caught out of bounds and time can be paused. We regularly participate in modes of reality in which we willingly bracket out the real world. Play allows us to do this. Most important of all, play is a practice in itself, and not something with an external end. Ritual is the primordial form of serious play in human evolutionary history, which means that ritual is an enhancement of the capacities that make play first possible in the mammalian line. There is a continuity between the two. The second trait we must consider is empathy. Empathy is not primarily in the head, it's in the body. At least that's how it started. It began with the synchronization of bodies running when others run, laughing when others laugh, crying when others cry, or yawning when others yawn. Empathy is absolutely central to what we call morality. Without empathy, you can't get human morality. It makes us interested in others. It makes us have an emotional stake in them. If religion, according to our definition, is a way of being together, then morality, which instructs us as to the best ways to be together, is an inextricable part of that. We see animals want to share food even though it costs them. We do experiments on them, and the general conclusion is that many animals' first tendency is to be altruistic and cooperative. Altruistic tendencies come very naturally to many mammals. But isn't this just self-preservation? Aren't the animals just acting in their own best interest? If they behave in a way that appears altruistic, aren't they just preparing for a time when they will need help? Well, to call that selfish because in the end these pro-social tendencies have benefits is a logical fallacy. Yes, of course, there are pleasurable sensations associated with the action of giving to others, but evolution has produced pleasurable sensations for behaviors we need to perform, like sex and eating and female nursing. The same is true for altruism. That does not fundamentally alter what the behavior is. Such a hard and fast line between altruism and selfishness then is naive at best and deceptive at worst. And we can see the same with discussions of social norms. Philosophers such as David Hume have made the distinction between what a behavior is and what it ought to be, which is a staple of ethical deliberation. An animal may perform the behavior X, but does it do so because it feels it should do so, thanks to an appreciation of a norm? There is evidence that animals actively try to preserve harmony within their social network by reconciling after conflict, protesting against unequal divisions, and breaking up fights, among others. They behave normatively in the sense of correcting or trying to correct deviations from an ideal state. They also show emotional self-control and anticipatory conflict resolution in order to prevent such deviations. This makes moving from primate behavior to human moral norms less of a leap than commonly thought. There's obviously a gap between primate social repair and the institutionalization of moral codes that lie at the heart of modern human societies. Still, all of these human moral systems make use of primate tendencies. How far back do these tendencies go? Probably like those capacities that allowed for play and ultimately ritual to the advent of parental care. During 200 million years of mammalian evolution, females sensitive to their offspring out-reproduced those who were cold and distant. Of course, nurturing is arguably seen in species of fish, crocodiles, and snakes, but the nurturing capabilities of mammals is really a giant leap forward in the evolutionary story. Our religious services of today may seem worlds away from the mammalian play and empathy that emerged in our deep past. But evolution teaches us that complex, advanced phenomena develop from simple beginnings. We don't come from nowhere. We are embedded in a deep biological and cosmological history. As the ape line evolved from our last common ancestor in more open environments, it was necessary to pressure apes, who prefer to go it alone, to form more lasting social structures. Natural selection was able to accomplish this astonishing feat by enhancing the emotional palettes available that had long been available to our ancestors. With a broader set of emotions, the hominin brain was then able to enhance some of its capabilities, some of which quite naturally lent themselves to a religious way of being. As these capacities got more acutely enhanced with the growth of the Homo brain and the development of the neocortex, behaviors such as play and ritual entered a new phase in hominin development, becoming the raw materials out of which cultural evolution would begin to institutionalize religion. And though this history doesn't determine us, this bio-cosmological history influences everything we do and are. Even the most seemingly autonomous human decision is made from within history. That's the big picture here. That's what we've been keeping in mind as we made our way back in time to the evolutionary seeds that would eventually, and quite slowly, blossom into human religion. So now that we have reviewed the earliest form of religion within the biocosmological context of our hominin ancestors, we are now ready to focus on the origins of religions in the Homo sapien cultures of our ancient past in parts 2 and 3.